And of course, it affects everybody in some way. If you're a renter, a homeowner, a seller, so trying to guess and predict the tea leaves of what's going to happen with real estate is very important to a lot of people. But the clues are all there. Everything you need to know about what's going to happen with real estate without just taking somebody's word for it or somebody's opinion, they're all right there, right in front of you to figure it out for yourself. Because if you just take the opinion of, let's say, a real estate market executive, they're going to have a bias towards maybe selling more homes. If you take the advice of maybe a hedge fund or banking industry, they're going to have certain biases. Even um, home buying customers, consumers, they may have a bias to having prices crash because they want to buy a house cheap. So you don't want to go by an opinion. You want to use facts. So we're going to jump right in. Before we do that, though, let's take a look at a an example of some really ridiculous real estate. It might give you some motivation to earn some income. Here's a property listing in Palm Beach, Florida. It's selling for $218 million. You can see it's almost like a private island. It has a little bridge going over it from um, the mainland in Palm Beach. Beautiful area. Waterfront, three on the far side. You can see the view. Looking looks like it's that would be looking to the north, um, actually to the south. Here's the Palm Beach Island, so that's looking south. This must be in the morning. Sunrise is to the right. Very private, very private. There's your bathroom. How big is the house? Well, guess what? 28,000 square feet. 28,000 square feet. So if your house is, let's say, 2,800 square feet, this is 10 times bigger. It's like 10 of your houses. There's the master bedroom. There's looks like the dining room, living area. Um, I mean, obviously ridiculous house. Nice grounds, pool, right? But the interesting thing about this house is also what the tax bill is. Here's the property detail lookup for the property, 10 Tarpon Island, Palm Beach, from the Palm Beach County property appraiser. How much is their tax bill? Well, their tax bill in 2022 was 1,184,000, roughly 1.2 million was their tax bill. That's not the assessed amount. The assessed amount is 76 million. This is what they have to write a check for to own that house. 1.2 million dollars was their tax bill for last year. So when you're frustrated and paying your tax bill for, 2, 3, $5,000, whatever your taxes are, imagine paying 1.2 million. And in fact, if somebody got a mortgage on this house and you had your taxes escrowed, meaning that they take a certain amount each month, that would be $100,000 per month for taxes. So we thought I'd have a little fun with looking at that property. So here's the big question: what's next for the housing market as told by Fannie Mae's forecast? Now, here's the thing: anytime that you see a forecast from some financial expert, some company, some bank, think of what their motivation is. What's the bias behind it? In many cases, the motivation behind a government agency putting a prediction out there or a what's next out there or what do you do if this happens is what's called a trial balloon. What they're trying to do is put the information out there, what they want to do, what they already know they're going to do, to start softening up the people from being aware of it. So anytime you see Fannie Mae, quasi government agency, putting out there, here's what's going to happen, look at it like they're trying to telegraph what they're doing. They're trying to anticipate what's going to happen so people are prepared for it. It's not a surprise. Housing market is defying earlier projections of significant decline. So it's defying declines, meaning it's going up. Fannie Mae released its revised forecast, which say they'll decrease by 1.2%. Why did Fannie Mae revise its home prices upward? It boils down to the fact that there's an ongoing shortage of homes. So basically, what this article is saying they're saying it's not the large that they said before. Before they said that home prices would fall 4%. Now they're saying it's going to go down 1%. So they're revising their prediction better. It's likely that it's not really what they predict. They probably predict it's going to go up a little bit, but if they jump from negative 4.2 to positive 2, that's too much of a jump. So they're probably hedging their bets a little bit. So this is just one source of information. The key to this is why. Here's the question always to ask. What is the why behind something? The fact that there's an ongoing shortage of homes. Well, is that ongoing shortage going to be solved anytime soon? Is it going to be solved by 2024? It's not. That shortage of homes has been in existence for a decade. In fact, even in the last 3 years, we've talked about it dozens of times that there's a shortage of homes. The number that many people put out there is about 5 million houses short. Could be 6 million, could be 4 million, but 5 is the rough number that people come up with. Despite last year's mortgage rate going up from 3 to 7, national home prices have shown resilience, outperforming earlier expectations. So there's the key right there. It's outperforming earlier expectations. Mortgage rates aren't going to go up this much again. All right. It went from 3 to 7, more than double. It's not going to go up double again. It's not even going to go up 3 percentage points again. It won't go from 7 to 10 in the next couple years. It might go to 8 or 9, but it's not going to go to 10. So if during a time it went from 3 to 7, home prices were resilient, actually went up a little bit. If they stay the same or go up 1 percentage point to 8, what does that tell you? Will they still be resilient? Sure. What's going to change? There are some other factors, income and home prices, but we'll get into that. Demand for housing has exceeded expectations. Home builders continue to add to that supply, but years of meager home building means that imbalance will continue for some time. Well, there's your answer. The imbalance will continue. The imbalance is already there. If it's going to continue, why wouldn't the trend of prices continue? In fact, they say that Fannie Mae doesn't expect national home prices to crash. Here's the thing. Nobody has a crystal ball. Nobody knows for sure. But if you are looking to make life decisions in part based on what you think is going to happen to home prices, it might be good to get some maybe unbiased, objective intel baked into your thought process. So you're not just copying somebody's opinion, mortgage industry opinion or real estate broker's opinion or home buyer's opinion. Look, if you go to a lot of home buyers blogs, there's a great one called the Housing Bubble blog that talks about how they think housing prices will go down. It's a great blog, has a lot of good information, but it's skewed from one perspective. If you distill the information out, you'll get some really good insight. If you combine all that, you'll have a good understanding, not wishful thinking. It'll be your best estimate. Don't use somebody else's guess. Use your own intelligence to figure out what you think is going to go on with housing prices. If you're looking to buy a house, you have to make decisions when you're going to buy. You don't want to buy now before it goes up. If you want to buy later, if you're selling a house, same thing. If you're in the industry that's related to home building, maybe you want to know about that. So let's talk about home building. What's going on with home building? Well, new homes are selling fast. And this is from Barron's. They talk about 3 ways to play. They're talking about stocks, what stocks to buy. But the important thing is that new homes are selling fast. And again, from Reuters, U.S. construction spending beats expectation on housing. New home construction has really gone through the roof. When the pandemic first hit, there was a fear that, well, maybe people wouldn't be buying new homes, right? There's going to be a crash in the economy. There's going to be a slowdown. So a lot of builders that were just starting to ramp up. Remember, the housing crash of 2008 really lasted until 2012. There was almost zero significant home building from 2008 to 2012. So if you fast forward 2012 to 2019, that's only 7 years of the home building industry ramping back up. And as you know, home building doesn't switch on and off like a switch. If you in 2012 were a builder and looked around and said, okay, I think it's safe to come out of the groundhog hole and start building, you don't instantly start building 1,000 homes. You maybe start acquiring property, you start building up your capital reserves, you maybe start getting some equipment on your balance sheet, and you start building cautiously, tentatively, right? So the first couple years, 2012, 13, 14, the builders were just kind of dipping their toe back in the water. And there was also that pent up demand, because even though there were too many houses in 2008, 2009, 2010, once you got to 11 and 12, there started to be a shortage of homes because there were no new homes built. All the excess inventory got absorbed. So by 2012, there was already a shortage. So the first few years, 13, 14, maybe 15, the excess building got absorbed. So now really you have 16, 17, 18, 19. You only have 4 years of robust new home construction to start backfilling that market until we had the pandemic in 2019. And right when that happened, builders said, wait a minute, this could be another crash. Or they have flashbacks, right? These are builders that have some form of PSTD, right? Where they don't want to get crushed again by some black swan event, some economic event. So they instantly pull back. Well, pretty quickly, fortunately, within 6 or 8 months, it was obvious that people wanted to buy new homes. The housing market went through the roof. And at that time, interest rates were still low. So they started to build. What was one of the reasons which people want to move back into, buy new homes? Well, we'll talk about that, but keep in mind too, the interest rates are a big part of it. And if you're wanting to know where interest rates are going to go, we'll get to that in a few minutes. The interest rate factor is extremely important, because in the near term, it might depress prices, because people who are on the margin, who are buying the most house that they can for their budget, when interest rates go up a point, they may have to take 30 or 40,000 off of their price budget for a house. Cash buyers or people that are not buying right at the edge, doesn't matter as much, but it does affect it in the short run. However, there's an old saying, you marry the price, you date the interest rate. The price of the house you pay is never going to change. You paid $500,000 for a house. You could go back 10 years in the future. That $500,000 is still going to be your purchase price. However, if you have a 6% interest rate or 7% interest rate, if in 3 years the rate goes down, you can refinance. So you can change your interest rate. So people who are savvy buyers look at interest rates when they bump up a little bit as times to purchase property, because when the rates go back down, if they do, then you got a deal on the house, right? That's one factor. The other factor is supply and demand. So we'll talk about interest rates more, and we'll show some data of what people are saying is going to happen with that. But in the meantime, let's take a look at why there was this rush back to real estate. Here's one reason: remote work, right? And at first, remote virtual office attendance was only for executives, white collar. It wasn't for the masses. But now, according to Wall Street Journal, this article, July 4th, that's today, right? For all kinds of jobs, lower income, less educated service workers are all clocking more work from home hours. So let's say that you are now realizing, just like everybody has for the last 3 years, 4 years, that work from home is a good thing. Does that make you more or less likely to want to buy a house if you're a renter? or if you live in a small house, you probably need to get more room. Look at this guy with his dog. He's got his desk, his computer, his little office space right next to his bed. That's the very least you can do. If you look at the home shopper type shows that are on TV, every network has one: Home Shopper, Home Hunter, House Bargain Hunter, whatever it's called, where the people go look at 3 or 4 houses. They follow them looking at the houses, and they pick one out and they show which one they picked out, right? You've seen those shows. Nowadays, all the buyers are mentioning, I need a space for work from home. I need a space for my home office. Almost everybody. That didn't used to always be the case. Sure, some executives or business people needed that before, but now everybody wants to have a space for work from home, because there are some people who are able to work from home, but if you don't have the space, you really can't go to your boss and say, all right, let me work from home 2 days a week. You have to have the space that's presentable. Usually you need video. That's why you can see our office. We have the space for all of our operations. But for most people, all you need is a desk for a computer, maybe a webcam, and a clear sanitized background. So that's one of the reasons why this is happening. U.S. construction spending beats expectations. Why new homes? Why new homes are so popular and not resale? Well, think about it. Where's your inventory going to come from? If you look to buy a house, it's kind of like buying a car. If you go to a dealership, those cars came from somewhere. They came from a factory. There is no real new house factory. It's builders building houses one at a time, maybe a subdivision. There's also resale homes. The inventory of resale homes comes from people who are willing and able to sell their existing home. They're living in it. That's their castle. They're not going to give it up unless they want to. Well, in addition to giving up their home, they also have to give up their low 3% mortgage rate. We've talked about this before. So the vast majority of people out there have a rate that you wouldn't want to give up. You'd rather give up, your firstborn son than give up your 3% interest rate. So where do you turn? Turn to new homes. New homes generally might cost a little more, but a lot of buyers are looking at it like that's the only place I can find a house. The resales that are out there, there's few and far between. And because of the fact that there's low inventory, the more likely sellers are people that have deferred maintenance, maybe a less desirable location or floor plan, maybe not updated. Maybe they've let the style get out of style. So when a buyer looks at a resale home that is available, which there's few and far between, and a new home that maybe is $30,000 or $40,000 more, maybe $50,000 more, by the time they say, well, I'm going to have to spend $40,000 or $50,000 on this resale home just to get it in good condition. I got to replace the roof. The kitchen needs remodeling, the floors, the carpet's old, right? So it now puts resale and new homes in the same perspective. So because of that, you have new home construction going through the roof. It's crazy. Where does that put the market? Well, it's unlikely that they can overbuild new houses. Just like with new cars. For a while, there was a shortage of new cars and they started building. There's still not a surplus of new cars. And car factories can build quicker. They can turn on the switch and get cars cranking out within a month. New homes take a lot longer with permits, land development, excavating, site work, plat design of the neighborhood, right? So new homes take a lot longer, and there's still a dramatic shortage of workers, of staff to build these homes, framers, etc. New car factories, the factory's in one place. They can just churn that out from one place. New home construction, or new car factories, I should say, new home construction, it's all over the place. You have to get workers to where the houses get built, and that's a tough thing to do. It's unlikely they can overbuild, so there's not going to be an excess capacity. The only thing that would change the availability from existing sellers is some event that makes them want to sell. And at the same time, there are new buyers coming into the market every day. That shortage of 5 million houses goes up all the time. Every week, there's more buyers that want to buy. So let's talk about interest rates. That's what everybody wants to talk about. Interest rates, because that affects your buying power. Boom. What if mortgage rates stay high? What if? Now, this sounds like a hypothetical question, but if they're asking the question, there's a reason for it, right? They're, first of all, at the very least, they're guessing that it could be true that interest rates are going to go up. Why ask the question if you don't think it's going to happen? Second of all, it might be a hypothetical to try to prep the market for this. Buying a home can be challenging. Home prices are high. Average mortgage rates are 7%. Will rates stay high for the foreseeable future? There's no way to tell, but there are ways to get around them if you do, right? See what they're saying? They're already kind of getting you prepared for that. What those ways are, maybe buy downs and buy now, refinance later. What we talked about is you marry the price, you date the interest rate. One clear option is to buy a house now and then refinance your loan. But what if the loan interest rates don't go down to refinance? Think about it. Is that a reason to not buy a house now? If interest rates are going to go up more in the future, doesn't that imply you should buy a house now? If interest rates are going to stay the same in the future, at least it doesn't change your objective to buy a house now. Interest rates shouldn't be a reason to change your time frame on buying a house. Pricing might change it if you think the prices are going to go down, but interest rates shouldn't change it, because interest rates can only do one of three things: go up, go down, or stay the same. No matter what happens to the rate, buying a house sooner, if you want to, if everything else in your life is good, is still the best option. If the rates go up, boom, you locked in a low rate, dodge the bullet. If rates go down, no problem, just refinance. If rates stay the same, well, no harm, no foul, at least you got your house. Now, if you don't want to buy a house for other reasons, that's great. But interest rates really aren't a factor in making that decision. However, according to Robert Esposito, mortgage refinancing is a good option for those searching for average price homes, as their value will only increase as time goes on. They will encounter the most competition. A property worth $500,000 today might be worth $600,000 a year from now, and then you realize you didn't save money. Now, remember, this is a person that has a bias. He's director of sales at a realty company, so he has a bias towards it. But what he's saying makes sense as long as you take it into account with other things. How can you get your mortgage payment down? Make a larger down payment. That doesn't change your rate. That just changes how much you're borrowing. Different loan options. It says adjustable rate. I would not recommend adjustable rate, because if the rates go up, now you're stuck and you might not be able to afford the house. Stay put and improve your current home. This is if you're currently a homeowner. This is actually not a bad idea. If you're currently a homeowner and you want to get a nicer, bigger house for some reason, do it to your existing house. Put an addition on. Probably going to be cheaper than switching houses. Remember, if you sell your house and move, for a typical house, that's going to cost you $50,000 in transaction cost. If you sell a $500,000 house at 6%, that's $30,000 just in real estate commission. Plus, you have closing costs on both sides, buying and selling closing costs. You have moving costs. You're probably going to have to spend a few thousand getting your current house up to snuff for buyers, fixing those little odds and ends that you maybe need to get fixed for a buyer. Then when you move to your new house, you're gonna have to spend another $3,000 or $4,000 changing things. House is never turnkey. Maybe new appliances, maybe new paint. You have to do something. So by the time you move from one house to another, you're going to be out of pocket $50,000. What if you took that $50,000 and added on a room to your house? Right? Even at $200 per square foot for construction, you can add a couple hundred square feet to your house, right? A 15 by 15 room. or 10 by 20 room for that much money. And you don't have to move. And your house now has added value. What else did they say? Oh, not much. And no results found. So one of the things that people are doing, this is a strategy, and we've talked about this, is to do what they call right sizing or simple sizing. And this is where if you're not currently a homeowner and you're looking to buy a house, when you think of the American dream home, what do you think of? A huge mansion? Well, we looked at one of those, didn't we? Here's one. Huge mansion. That would be great, right? If you can afford $1 million a year for property tax, nothing wrong with a big mansion, right? But that's not what they're talking about. What they're talking about is getting the right size house. According to a recent report, surveyed 1,600 Americans. It might not be none of the above. And the other ones are Cape Cod house with black shutters, surrounded by a picket fence, modern farmhouse. While some might assume that Americans are always looking for more, the trend shows opposite direction. Smaller homes, easier to maintain. Well, easier to maintain is one reason, but the big reason is the cost, the price. And our official philosophy is buy the cheapest house you can stand. Buy the cheapest house you can stand. Buy a house for sure, but if you buy the cheapest house you can stand, now your budget is not under strain. And if you have extra money, you can decide to spend that on a discretionary basis. Look, if you book yourself into the most expensive house you think you can afford, your mortgage payment is now locked in at that high number. You can never pay less any one month. If you have a medical expense, if you have your car breaks down, if you want to put more money in savings, your mortgage payment is $3,000 a month every month, and you have no choice. You can't pay $2,900 one month if you feel like it. You can't pay $2,000 one month if you feel like it. You have to pay $3,000 every month, no matter what. However, if you buy a cheaper house and you have your mortgage payment of, let's say, $2,000 a month, well, if one month you have extra money and you want to spend $3,000, there's a couple things you can do. You can send that extra $1,000 to the bank and pay down your mortgage earlier. That'll save you interest. How much interest? Well, if your mortgage rate is 7% and you pay them an extra $1,000, that's like getting 7% return on your money. Can you get that in a CD? Can you get that in any investment? Probably not. So if you buy the cheapest house you can afford, the cheapest house you can stand and be willing to live in it, you now have an option. If you have extra cash, put it into that, pay off your mortgage earlier. Now, you might say, well, if I don't have any extra cash, well, if you don't have any extra cash at $2,000, how would you afford a $3,000? You're probably going to have extra cash. The other thing you can do is you can put it into your house, right? If you bought a house that is the cheapest you can stand and you don't like the floors, we'll save up 2 or 3 months, a few thousand, and put in a new floor. If you don't like the outside paint, take that $1,000 a month or $500 a month for 6 months and paint your house. You can always do upgrades if you have the extra cash and it's adding value to your house. If you do the right things, it probably adds more value than 7% too. That is not only a strategy that we've talked about, it's now popular. How popular? 81% of survey participants wanted homes that were more simply designed. Simple is best. Quiet is key. Right? And quiet, that's a good point too. If you buy a house that's a little less luxurious initially than you would like, you can then buy more elbow room, right? You could buy a condo, high luxury townhouse with all the fixtures, granite countertops, but you don't have you'd elbow room, fled a little more kind of downscale, maybe raggedy, beat up a little bit, but you have more land and you are a little bit quiet, a little more private and secluded location. That's going to be a trade-off. The more quiet and secluded, the less the house is going to be, right? Could this mean the new American dream home is located on an island? Well, we saw that, right? We saw how that works. Here's an island. But that's probably not going to be practical, but you can buy something that is private and secluded location. This could also mean city condos are on their way out too, right? Nobody wants that, right? Yeah, you want to be close to the amenities, but you can be a little secluded. Look, you don't have to be in the middle of the woods, prepper style, but you can have a little more elbow room, maybe a little more privacy from your neighbors, maybe a little bit less of a view looking right into your backyard. That's what people want. 50% wanted private and secluded location, right? 75% willing to downsize to have some of these advantages. Buy the cheapest house you can stand. How cheap could it be? Well, you see in the link below, right? Our website, Homes Cheap, we review these all the time. There are houses that are in the 200s. We've up until now had houses that were 200,000 or less. We're going to start now mixing in houses in the twos because it opens up a lot more options. If you find a house that's 240, 250, 260, doesn't matter what area you're in, what geographic location you're in, there's houses in that range. You're going to look at it and say, I don't want to live in that house. It doesn't have, big kitchen. It doesn't have, nice floors. The bathroom's outdated. When you watch those home buyer shows, and we watch them all the time, you see the comments that people talk about when they're picking out these houses. What are the factors? A lot of the factors are changeable. They're not chronic. If the bathroom has ugly wallpaper, you can change that. If it's on a lot where you can reach out your window and borrow a cup of sugar from your neighbor because their house is right next to yours, you can't change that. So by selecting features that are permanent that you want to prioritize, that's going to put you in a better position. The features that are maybe ugly, annoying, need work, yeah, they're real. They're not going to go away by themselves, but they are changeable down the road. And if you can stand some of those things in the short run, you can put a coat of paint, you can cut up some lumber to maybe put a new railing on the fence post. You can maybe fix the yard if it's got a lot of weeds on it. You can fix those things over time. In the meantime, the house is livable and you're in. You locked in your mortgage payment where it's not going to go up. And if you have extra money, feather your nest a little bit. Do a little bit of improvement on the property. So we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk about a little bit different subject with finances. If you ever find yourself in a legal conflict, lawsuit, potential lawsuit, what do you do? What are the best practices? How do you hire an attorney? You may find that it's difficult to even get an attorney to call you back. Are there any diversionary options you can use to prevent having to go to court, to prevent having to be in a conflict in a courtroom? What about leveraging your position? Even if you're going to go to court or not, there's things you can do in advance to make your case stronger, whether you have an attorney or not, whether it's a small claims lawsuit, full-blown lawsuit, or just a negotiated settlement. There's things you can do. So we're going to talk about that from our investigative side, or what options you have as a party to a conflict. Maybe it hasn't risen to the level of full-blown court case, but at least you know where you're at. And sometimes you can prevent that from happening. You can head it off at the pass. If you have another party you're dealing with that's hell-bent on dragging you into court, there's ways you can avoid that. So we'll talk about that after the break. See you back in a minute or so. All right, we're back. We're going to talk about legal conflicts, and hopefully, you never are involved with one. Sometimes they come from some event you're working on, and we just talked about real estate. Many of the legal conflicts that we work with have to do with some real estate transaction. And our investigative division, you'll see it here, Active Intel, that's our licensed private investigative company. We deal with all kinds of research and investigation for legal conflicts. We also offer mediation services. You'll see that link here, but we'll get to that momentarily. Most of the cases that we see start out with something relatively small. It's a contract that's been breached. It's a conflict between parties that gets out of control. It escalates. Both people think they're right. They swear up and down that, I'm correct, you're wrong, and the people just go crazy. You start sending back nasty emails. You start yelling at each other across the fence if you're neighbors. You start sending, cease and desist letters. Next thing you know, you're in a conflict. So now one or both people start talking about hiring an attorney, or maybe you do hire an attorney. Well, there's step one. How do you hire an attorney for this? When do you hire an attorney? And how do you get the right attorney? One of the most common complaints that we get from clients for an investigation is, I can't get my attorney to call me back. I can't get an attorney to take my case, or my attorney's no good. Now, that doesn't say anything bad about the law profession, the legal profession. There are good attorneys and bad attorneys, right? But in general, attorneys are like any other profession. They're just out there to do a job. So why is it that there's so many clients that have difficulty engaging with an attorney, getting one to be able to hire in the first place, getting them to call you back, or that you think they're no good? Well, let's start with getting one to call you back in the first place, to hire one. Attorneys are not like a normal business, and you can ask any attorney this. They'll back this up 100%. They're not like a car dealership where if you show up with cash and you want to buy a car, they'll sell you a car. Attorneys don't want to take every case. And it's not always about the money. Sometimes it's about the money, but it's not always. And even when it's about the money, it's not that they don't want to take some. It's just that it may not be worth it. So if you have a small case and you're disputing $5,000 or $10,000, it's going to be tough for an attorney to say, yeah, I want to take your case, because most attorneys don't want to open up a case file and go through all the trouble for something that's, maybe going to be worth $1,000 or $2,000. Because here's why. You might think they're being greedy, but if an attorney charges $200 or $300 or $400 an hour, even $2,000, that might be only 4 or 5 hours worth of work. It's going to take an attorney an hour or two just to review the documents, review the case, do some research to begin with. It's going to take them an hour to write a report. That means they only have 2 hours to actually work on the case. They're not going to be able to help you that much in a couple hours. So if you're trying to contact attorneys with a small case, you may never get a call back, or they may tell you, well, I'll call you back, and they never do. You might just get the brush off. If the case is too small, it's not that they don't want the money or they're too greedy. It's that they know they're not going to be able to help you enough to make it worth spending that money. And they don't want to take your money for something that's not going to benefit you. Why don't they just tell you? Well, a lot of times, when they tell people that, the person's going to argue with them. So they just maybe do like ghosting, like they do in dating, which isn't a good thing, but that's probably what happens. What about a larger case? Well, I have a case that, I want to sue somebody for $300,000 and I want to hire an attorney. That's great. Why does an attorney want that case? Well, there's a couple reasons. One, it's not always about the money, because the quality of the client is an important factor for attorneys. What do you mean by client? I'm not a quality person. You are a quality person. It's just that relating to an attorney is a very unique relationship. You've heard of high maintenance customer, low maintenance customer. High maintenance customer, look, if you're hiring an attorney, it's going to cost you tens of thousands of dollars or more to work on a case, they want to make sure that it's not going to be a nightmare for them. If you're going to spend that much money, you're probably going to have expectations. Look, if you spend $50,000 on a car, you want that dealership to give you an actual car and not give $50,000 and give you nothing. However, if you hire an attorney for $50,000 for a case, there's no guarantee you're going to win your case. See where that's going? It's a 50-50 chance. You could win, the other side could win. And the attorney wants to make sure that you understand that, because some people just say, look, I'm paying you $50,000, I better win. You may have a good case. You may think you have a good case, but when it goes to court, there's a lot of variables. The jury might just be crazy. The jury might have a bias against you or in favor of the other person. Attorneys know this. They do cases all the time. During the course of this case happening, before you even get to court, you're going to have to do things called discovery, where both sides exchange documents with each other. You're going to have to do depositions, where you sit down in the law firm office and give your version of the story. You're going to have to do requests for production, where both parties request things from third parties. You may have to hire expert witnesses. Throughout that process, which may take a year before you even get to court, the attorney keeps billing you every month, $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 a month, whatever it is. And you're not seeing any results. And what then happens is, if they see that, rightfully so, you have expectations, I want to win my case, I want to get the trial, it's taking too long. Now the attorney has taken from you 30, 40, or 50,000. You're getting frustrated, you're getting impatient, and now you're going to become a problem customer, and you're going to be yelling and screaming at them, or their paralegal or their receptionist. If they think that's going to happen, they're not going to take your case. Whether you think that's right or wrong, or they're unreasonable, that doesn't matter. They know for a fact that it's a profession like anything else. It's like going to the doctor, that you pay the doctor and they're going to try as hard as they can. But the results aren't always what you want. The results are what the overall picture says they're going to be. And because they have more cases to choose from than they can take all of them, they're going to pick the ones that aren't the highest money. They're going to pick the ones that aren't going to make them lose their sanity. Again, doesn't mean it's right or wrong. You might think that they should do these things. I'm just telling you how it is in that industry, because we talk to attorneys, many times per day. And they don't want cases that have a high percentage of being a loser case. And you might think, my case, I guarantee to win. I'm sure that the other party thinks the same thing. They feel the same way you do, that they're going to win. What can you do to maximize your chances of winning? You have to get good evidence. Your knowledge of your case, your story that you can tell, your version of events, it's in your head. You might have spoken it out loud, verbally, but it's just a bunch of hot air at that point. Yeah, you may have some documents, some papers, some contracts, things that were signed, right? But most of the story is in your head. All that has to be documented, not with just your testimony, but with actual third-party documents. Because if you go to court and you say, this is what happened, blah, 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 the other side's going to say, this is what happened, blah, blah, blah. Now the court has to decide from two people just running their mouth. If you have actual hard copy evidence that came from a place other than you, now you're upping your game. If you come in with screenshots, printouts, or whatnot that you came up with, the court or the jury or somebody or the judge might kind of put a little spin on it, like, well, did you make that on your own, or is it out of context? But if you come with evidence that's been established from an unbiased third party, then it has a higher probability. That's what an investigator can do. They can do an investigation and they can certify and document that these records are true and accurate. They came from the original source. If you have a printout of, let's say, a real estate deed, if you bring it to court, the argument could be made that it's not the real deed. Maybe it's been photoshopped. Maybe it's an old deed. There's a newer one, or it could be defeated in court. However, if a certified title examiner or a licensed investigator or a document forensics person can present it and say, I did a search, This is the actual document. I certify that this came from the official records. Now that document has more value, has more weight with the court, with the jury. And the more evidence you can create could be financial records, bank records, forensic accounting. It may be accident records. It may be testimony from an expert witness to say, yes, this record is true. Now you're building up your pile of truth higher than the other side's pile of truth, because that's what it comes down to. At some point, somebody has to make a decision who is telling the truth, who is more valuable in that argument. Could be a judge, could be a jury. Somebody has to make that decision. Now, as you know, there have been very high profile cases, usually criminal cases, that you see in the news that you say, how could that person be found guilty? There's no way. They have to be innocent, or the other way around. How could that person be found not guilty? The evidence was right there, smoking gun, clear as day. So it's not always about the evidence. It's about how it's argued in court with expert witnesses, with people that have certifications that present a certain point of view. It's more complicated than just you telling your story. A lot of clients say, I want my day in court. Well, that's good, but your day in court, you talking, means nothing. All it does is gets it off your chest. It might make you feel better because you can complain and tell your story to the judge and to the world about how bad that other person is. But really, you're the only person who believes that until there's true evidence other than what comes out of your mouth for that judge, jury to believe. The other side's going to say the same thing, and they might make up lies. So you have to have things that counter those lies. Could be a divorce case where the other side's making stuff up out of thin air. You have to have documented evidence. Even if you go through that process and you have all the evidence and you go through all the depositions, and depositions are where you call the other party and maybe even witnesses into the office of your lawyer, and they have to sit there and answer questions. What date did this happen? When did you do this? And like all that's documented. It's not in court, it's at the law firm, but those records and that testimony is presented in court later. And then you're called in to the other opposing party's attorney's office, and you have to sit there and get grilled with questions. Then you have to do discovery, where you have to request information from the other party, and they demand information from you. Give me a copy of your bank records. Give me a copy of your medical records. And you have to provide them. After all that, and that happens, months in between. You put motions in, you get an answer on the motion, you put requests for production, you have a deposition. Each one of these takes 2 or 3 or 4 months in between. It could be a year to year and a half before you even get anywhere near a courtroom. And during that time, guess what? Clock's ticking. $5,000, $6,000, $10,000 a month with that attorney. So you get to a month and a year and a half in, you could have spent $100,000 with your attorney, and you haven't even seen the inside of a courtroom yet. So let's say you get to the inside of the courtroom and you've done everything right. You did an investigation, you did depositions, you did everything right, and you win. You win. Great. And you sued the person for $250,000. Well, you got to remember, that $100,000 you spent up front doesn't count the trial cost. The clock goes a lot faster when it's in trial, because when an attorney's working at their office, they might work an hour, 2 or 3 a day on your case. The next day, an hour, 2 or 3. When you go to trial, the attorney, their paralegal, sometimes 2 attorneys, are on the clock for 10 hours each day, because their travel time is counted. Their in-court time is counted, even if they're waiting around for the judge. So call it 10 hours a day for 3 days. That's 30 hours billed time times maybe 2 attorneys, or an attorney and a paralegal. So let's call it 50 hours of billed time at how much an hour? 300 an hour? 400 an hour? It's 50, 60,000 for the trial cost. So now you have 150, maybe 200,000 worth of legal expenses for a decent sized case. And talk to any attorney, they'll tell you that's a good guess. So unless you're going to win 250, 300, 400 or more, it's taking a big chunk out of what your winnings are. And there's no guarantee you're going to win. What if you spend that and you lose? That's why attorneys aren't quick to just jump on every case, because they know at some point they're going to be in a position of having to defend, I took 100,000 from you and you lost, or it was dismissed, or the judge threw it out the case, or some evidence you wanted to get in couldn't get in. They're going to have to answer to you because you're the customer and you gave them a lot of money. So attorneys have that going from, how do you prevent that from happening? How do you get the attorney to take your case? Make it clear to them, I understand. Look, I know what I'm getting into here. I just want a good attorney. I'll work with you. I'll give you the information you need. Show that you're going to be a good partner. Not like a customer is always right, like you would in a restaurant. If the steak is bad, you send it back. If the attorney sees that's how you're going to be as a client, they won't even call you back. Or they might say, well, I'll think about it and I'll get back to you, and then you'll never hear from them. They may not be that abrupt or rude with you. They might just kind of like slowly let you fade away. If you're already in a case, don't become that client, because then the attorney's going to put your case on the back burner because they don't want to really take it any further. They're hopefully you're going to go away. What is another way around it? Well, it's self-serving. I get it, because we do this. It's mediation. But if early on in that case, when you've only spent $5,000 or $6,000 already with the attorney, what if you and the other side can have a third party step in between the two of you, like a referee in a boxing match, and say, wait a minute, let's see what this case is all about. Maybe you've done a little bit of discovery. Maybe you've done a little bit of back and forth. Even if you haven't, the mediator can ask you. It's called shuttle diplomacy. They go back and forth between both parties. What do you say is your case? And that way you can say it verbally. You don't have to do documentation or prove anything. They can just hear you out. Go to the other side. Tell me your side of the case. And they can go back and forth between the two and say, well, in reality, 80% of your conflict you already agree on. You just don't realize it. You already agree on most of the conflict. The parts you don't agree on, they'll tell you the reality. Look, in reality, you're probably going to lose this part of it because you really can't document it. And they may tell the other side, look, you probably will lose this part because it's really not a conflict. So I would recommend that you come together with this agreement. The fact that they take away that animosity between the parties, and everything you say in that mediation is private. It's not going to go outside those four walls unless there's certain exceptions. Like if you threaten to shoot somebody, they have to tell the cops. But even if your mediated agreement is a little less than you thought, let's say you're asking for 200,000 and you only get 170. Well, you don't have 100,000 in legal fees, and everything you say is private. If you go to court, even if you win, everything that's evidence that the other side put on the table and you did, it's out in public records. 2 or 3 or 5 years later, if somebody wants to do research on you, they can find everything that was presented in court, all the evidence, all the dirty laundry about you, all the embarrassing things about you, emails, phone calls, photos off your phone, things that were presented in court. It's all out there, public record. And you may not want that. That's why a lot of celebrities use mediation. The other thing about mediation is it doesn't lock you into anything. If you go to mediation and the mediator says, here's what I think you should do, you can say, no, it's take it or leave it. I'm sorry. You can take it or leave it. You can say, nah, I don't like this. I'm going to walk away. I'll go back to litigation. Fine. You can do that. Or you might say, nah, I'm going to think about it and get back to them. Once you go to court, you can't say, I'll think about it, the verdict. If the judge says you owe 200,000, you can't tell the judge, no, I'll think about it and get back to you. And that's not how it works. You got to pay whatever the court says. Mediation is the last chance you have to control your own decisions, your own destiny. And even your attorney will recommend it. Even if you think, well, the attorney doesn't like it because they're not going to get more billable hours. They don't want more billable hours. There's enough billable hours out in the world for that attorney to take if they want to. They want peace in their life, just like you do. You got to remember that conflict is 1 or 2 or 3 of conflicts you have in your whole life. Maybe you have a divorce, you have a lawsuit, you have some other conflict with work. You maybe have it 3 times in your life. The attorney has it 3 times a day. So it eats away at your psyche when you're always involved with people in conflict. So they want to try to help you resolve it. It's good for them. It's good for you too, because it keeps you. Most people that even when they win a lawsuit don't look at it like a big victory. That day in court, when you jump up and down and raise your hands, yeah, you might feel good that day. More about that it's a relief that the process is over, not that it's a crowning victory. But in the days or weeks after that, most plaintiffs or defendants that win a court case look back on it as with regret and say, man, I wish I never did this. Ask an attorney how they feel. They talk to clients all the time that regret going through the process, because the net result is you never really gain anything. Most of the time you get hung up on that pride is, I want my day in court. I want to win. I want to tell my story. And that's great, but it may cost you a lot of time and money and attention. Even if you win and everything's good, you got to remember during that whole year and a half, you're constantly sleepless nights, worried about the results, worried about writing that check to the attorney. So you may want to rethink going through that year and a half of your life that you'll never get back, where you can't spend time with your family, quality time at work, paying attention to positive things in life, always about the conflict, and trying to short circuit it is a good idea. It's not the same thing as negotiating a settlement with your attorney, because when your attorney is trying to negotiate a settlement, they're negotiating with the other attorney and it's still butting heads. It's not you and the counterparty butting heads, but it's your two attorneys butting heads. So there's still conflict. A mediator takes that out and says, okay, what's already agreed to? What's on the table? And they try to make it easier. They try to facilitate that and smooth over, ruffle over the feathers. Most of what goes into a conflict, it's just pride. It's ego. And by taking that off the table, it's a hard thing to do, but you can save yourself a lot of time and aggravation. So next time we're going to talk more about AI and how it's affecting people's finances. We'll also talk about some strategies for creating protection against income loss from AI or the economy. One of the things that a lot of people have asked about is, when you deal with professionals, builders, contractors, are there any strategies for that? Just like we talked about attorneys, because a lot of contractors are making it tough to hire them because they have to pick and choose their projects too. Look for that in the next video. We'll see you later today.
Are you tired of automated systems and chatbots when you need assistance? Experience actualhuman.com and connect with real professionals, not automation. At actualhuman.com, we bring you a network of professionals who are excited to answer your questions and provide guidance. Getting started is easy. Let us show you how. Here's how it works. Step 1. Select the best date and time for your video call. Step 2. Describe your situation and the areas you're looking for advice. Step 3. Connect one-on-one with an expert and get the undivided attention that you deserve. Experience the difference. Visit actualhuman.com today and